97% of us change our clocks, but research says saving daylight is killing us.
This is not hyperbolic. We literally have data on this. For example, the rate of heart attacks is higher in the week or two after the time change.
This is Dr. Catherine Rockline. She runs the Rockline Psychology Lab at the University of Pittsburgh, where she studies many things, including circadian rhythms, something the rest of us call our internal clocks.
We wanted to know, how does the circadian clock organize our behavior? How does it use information from the environment, like the timing of dawn and dusk? And then how does it get our sleep-wake cycle in sync with the solar day?
She says the sun helps us regulate our internal systems by driving our internal clocks. So what happens when we shift our external or social clocks?
Misalignment between your body's clock and your social clock is where we get all these health consequences. And our body clock pretty much tracks the sun. And so when we try to follow a social clock that's out of sync with the sun, that's where we get the misalignment.
She says this happens to everybody, not just Americans, especially where there's an irregular time zone, like the Kingdom of Spain.
Being here all the time, I wasn't aware.
Dr. Nuria Chinchilla is an author and professor who studies how business affects humans at the IESE Business School in Barcelona.
When I started traveling abroad, then I started seeing that, they have more time. They have a much more rationalized way of living. They have time for work, but then very short lunchtime, and then go home at 5, and then they have an evening. And so I started looking at that, and I said, okay, we have to change that in Spain.
She says Spain's been in the wrong time zone for more than 80 years. By wrong, she means Spanish time doesn't line up with the sun. And she says it's had lasting consequences.
So there is no social life, no time for social life or for families or for so many things that are so important for sustainable people, for healthy people.
Spain's in the same time zone as Poland and Serbia, but time in Spain doesn't look like time in Serbia. What do I mean by that?
Bueno, yo estoy en una ciudad que se llama Vigo.
This is Jorge Lenz. He's a photographer and photography professor in Spain. And this is Sarah Mihailovic. She's a student.
I am in Belgrade, Serbia.
They've never met, and they're 1,500 miles apart.
What time is it where you are right now? Can you show me a clock?
For both of them, it's 5:19 p.m. But in Spain, 5:19 looks like this. And in Serbia, it's night.
Sarah, if you didn't know the time in Spain and you saw Jorge's picture, what time would you guess it was?
I would say it's like probably around 3-4 p.m. or even maybe earlier. It is very interesting to see. Goodbye.
Ciao.
And this happens on a larger scale in China. The country spans 5 time zones but operates under one, China's Standard Time, or GMT+8. So a 6:43 sunrise in Jimusi is a 10:03 sunrise in the Kashgar prefecture. As a famous physicist once said, time is relative. Like how time passes quickly when you're having fun, and it drags when you're bored.
If you look at time zones, you actually see an increased rate of disease the further west you go, because they're constantly fighting their body. They're constantly in this compromised state.
This is Dr. Emily Manoogian.
Daylight savings time actually makes that a step worse because it decreases it by another hour. So the people that were correctly aligned are now an hour delayed, and the people that were an hour delayed are now 2 hours delayed. So this is why there's such a big push right now, by the scientists at least, for permanent standard time.
She's a researcher at the Salk Institute, where she tracks and analyzes circadian rhythms in humans.
So my mission is to gain an understanding of how we can optimize our circadian system to improve our overall health, and then use that information to make it common knowledge so everyone can actually do it.
So if science has proof DST is bad, should we still shift our clocks? Governments used to say having more sunlight in the early evenings cut down on the need for artificial light. At least it did before the digital age. Today, artificial light's everywhere, all the time. So researchers say that energy savings is no longer a factor. When you think about it, having an extra hour of daylight should make us more productive. But instead, we struggle to keep up.
And it's really hard to sync to that. And it's not even just your internal rhythms, it's that The environmental cues that are telling you what time of day it is and the clock on your wall are telling you two different times, and you're trying to make them both work together.
She says we don't have just one internal clock. Almost every cell in your body has a clock. And these clocks regulate chemicals we need, like glucose for digestion and melatonin for sleep.
And it also helps you wake up by inducing a peak of cortisol right before you wake up to wake you up. And when that can be mistimed, that's also a big problem, because if you're already awake and then you get this peak in cortisol, it doesn't just change the cortisol even, it changes other aspects of your heart functioning. This is why when you have daylight saving time switch, you see an increase in heart attacks because of that misalignment, just that 1 hour even.
Essentially, when you change the time, almost every cell in your body is fighting your social clock.
Cancer, cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, every affective disorder, bipolar, major depression, they're all linked to circadian disruption. So compromising the system really does have intense effects.
In the US, our social clock's determined by our federal government, but 32 states have discussed changing this, and the reasons are based on research by scientists like Emily and Catherine. And in 2019, the European Parliament voted to abolish summertime, or DST, in most of Europe. Starting this March, member states will choose to remain on standard time or move to summertime permanently.
If you could do one thing that improved our nationwide or worldwide obesity epidemic, the rates of chronic metabolic diseases like cardiovascular disease and diabetes, that lengthened people's lifespan, that reduced the risk of depression, substance use, ADHD, sleep disorders like insomnia, if you could increase GDP, if you can increase people's productivity, their sense of well-being, and their sense of alertness, if you could do one thing to accomplish all of those effects, it would be to just stop having daylight saving time, just adopt standard time permanently.
Almost everything has a debate except for this. It's been empirically proven that it has not worked in the past. And the science is very clear, and you can even see it within time zones that these time differences make a big difference for overall health for individuals. Constant standard time really is the best option for everyone.
For scientists, the daylight saving problem is simple. We can build a world where circadian science helps us sleep better, be more productive, improve our mood, and help us lose weight. Think of the old phrase, time is money. For the last 100 years, humans have been saving daylight at the expense of our health. But if we invest some time to improve our social clocks, the science says we might see a better return.